Good morning, it's today again. Welcome back to Joseph's Reserves. I'm Joseph, and I store 20% of my income in the form of rare coins and precious metals. When most people look at 90% silver, they see stacks of old coins, dimes, quarters, half dollars. Maybe worn, maybe shiny, mixed all together. But what often goes overlooked is that 90% silver isn't just a way to hold metal, it's actually a timeline. Every coin in front of you represents a specific moment in American history, and more importantly, a deliberate decision about what or who deserve to be remembered on everyday money. So today we're going to take a look at this 90% silver, and I want to walk through it chronologically. I'm going to take you all the way from the 1800s through 1964, not just showing you all the series, but explaining all the design changes and a little bit about what was going on in America at the time. Because knowing this helps you understand that you're not just stacking silver, you're stacking history. Congratulations to Maestro Metals for again being the first to comment on my video yesterday. Thank you so much for the support. Go find him down below to start a conversation. And before we jump into the Barber series, and some people might be surprised to find out that coinage does go before that, and actually it goes before 90% silver. Here's a quick history on where 90% silver came from. When the United States first started making silver coins under the Coinage Act of 1792, they actually weren't 90% silver. They were about 89.24% fine. And it wasn't until 1837 that the U.S. standardized silver coinage to be 90%. And even then, the amount of silver per dollar of face value wasn't what we think of it today. The system we're familiar with is the idea that $1 of face value contains 0.723 troy ounces of silver, roughly 25 grams of total weight of 90% silver. And that actually wasn't even set into stone until 1873, an event that some call the crime of 1873. If you haven't heard of it, definitely look it up. It is absolutely amazing for you to know what happened during the Coinage Act of 1873, especially as a stacker. However, what is typically grouped together as 90% silver, or commonly called junk silver, starts at the Barber series. Even though the Barber coins we're talking about sit right on the edge, they are still common enough to find mixed into regular 90% silver today. So now let's talk about the oldest coins that some people have within their stack of 90% silver, the Barber coinage. The Barber coins, dimes, quarters, and half dollars are designed by Charles Barber, the chief engraver of the U.S. Mint. These coins were introduced in 1892 and ran all the way until 1916. One of the most interesting things about them is that all three denominations share the same basic design. That was very intentional. At the time, and even before this, the Mint prioritized uniformity, simplicity, and a kind of classical look that reflected stability. But by the early 1900s, people were wanting to have a change in this American coinage. They believed that American coins became stale. There was a growing push, especially during the era of Theodore Roosevelt, to bring more artistry and meaning to this U.S. coinage. So while the Barber coins did their job, they were eventually replaced not because they failed, but because the country wanted something more inspiring. And this brings us to 1916, which is one of the most important years of all of 90% silver. In this year, every single coin was replaced with three brand new ideas: the dimes, quarters, and half dollars. These coins were designed by Adolph Weinman, and the series covers World War I, and for the case of the dimes and half dollars, the Great Depression and World War II. When you're holding one of these, you're holding a piece of that entire era. The winged Liberty Head dime, commonly called the Mercury dime, it actually doesn't depict Mercury, but Liberty wearing a winged cap, symbolizing the freedom of thought. As the United States was heading into a period of global conflict and uncertainty, This imagery reflected the ideas of freedom, movement, and resilience. At the same time, we got the Standing Liberty Quarter. This is one of the most visually striking coins the U.S. has ever produced. Liberty was shown holding a shield and an olive branch, representing both the defense and peace. That balance was intentional, reflecting that the country was preparing for the conflict while also hoping to avoid it. One thing you'll notice is with these, they wear a lot. A lot of these quarters have completely worn off dates, and it tells you how heavily they circulated. They weren't saved, they were used, moving through the economy during some of the most turbulent decades of American history. Then we move to the half dollar of the same era, the Walking Liberty half dollar, also designed by Weinman. The Liberty is walking towards this rising sun, wrapped in the American flag, symbolizing forward momentum and optimism. And if this design looks familiar, it should. It's used today on the American Silver Eagle, and that just tells you how powerful this design really is. And now, as we move into the 1930s, we hit another key moment. 1932, the introduction of the Washington Quarter. 1932 marked the 200th anniversary of the birth of George Washington, and it was originally intended as a one-year commemorative coin, but it became permanent. This marks the shift of the U.S. coinage from symbolic features of liberty to real historic figures, and at this point moving forward, that became the standard. Next, we move into the 1940s and another major transition, this time with the dime. In 1946, the Mercury dime was replaced by the Roosevelt dime, featuring Franklin D. Roosevelt. This wasn't just a design choice, this was a tribute. Roosevelt had passed away in 1945, and he was closely associated with the March of Dimes, an organization dedicated to fighting polio. Roosevelt himself battled polio, and he became a symbol of perseverance through it. Putting him on the dime connected him directly to that legacy and a movement that millions of Americans supported. That's one of the moments where the coin becomes more than currency. It became a message. Then, a couple years later, in 1948, we see the introduction of the Franklin half dollar, featuring Benjamin Franklin. Franklin is unique because he wasn't a president, but he did represent something just as important: innovation, intelligence, and civic responsibility. He was a diplomat, an inventor, and a key figure of the founding of the country. At the time America was coming out of World War II, Franklin symbolized practical wisdom and nation building. That series ran until 1963, when we hit one of the most dramatic transitions in U.S. coinage. In 1963, John F. Kennedy was assassinated, and the impact was immediate. Within months, the U.S. Mint had redesigned the half dollar to honor him, releasing the Kennedy half dollar of 1964. People began saving these almost instantly, not just for the silver, but because of what they represented. That's why so many 1964 Kennedy halves are still found in such high condition today. And 1964 is a date that ties everything all together. It's the final year that dimes, quarters, and half dollars were made of 90% silver for circulation. After that, everything changed. Now, as you're looking at your own stack, or like I am here counting through it, this is where things start to come together in a practical way too. Because once you understand the history, you can also understand the math behind it. For every $1 of face value of 90% silver, the coins were supposed to be 25 grams. However, since they were circulated, there is a little bit of wear. So instead of using that 0.723 troy ounces of silver per dollar I had mentioned earlier, the entire industry kind of agreed on 0.715 troy ounces of silver per $1 of face value. And that's where the rule of $1.40 face value equals 1 ounce of silver comes from. So when you're counting your dimes, quarters, and half dollars, you can easily just stack them up and actually estimate how many ounces of silver there are based on the face value alone. And this is where it all connects, because now you're not just looking at a pile of 90% silver. Now you're seeing the metal, you're seeing the progression, you see the shift from liberty to real historic figures. You're seeing how major events, wars, anniversaries, and even tragedies shaped what ended up in people's pockets. As a stacker, that changes how you look at what you're holding. You might find yourself gravitating towards certain designs, not just because of premiums or condition, but because of the history behind them. And maybe it's the earlier coins that feel more connected to the past. Maybe it's the later ones that are easier to recognize and tend to have a little bit more remaining silver. There's no right answer, but there is a deeper understanding. So now, next time you're counting your silver, this is where these coins can really stand out. Because instead of just stacking the coins up, you're telling the story behind them. Every coin you pick up has context. And that's really the goal. Not just stacking more, but to understand more. So as you go through your 90% silver, I'd be curious, what do you find yourself gravitating towards? The older designs, the newer ones, the history, or just the silver content? Let me know down in the comments. If you haven't already, go to my website and check out my Joseph's Reserves It's Today Again coffee. Every morning is a gift. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, today. It's Today Again is a reminder that God has given us this day once more, with new mercy, new opportunity, and real work to be done. It's the moment to show up, build good habits, and take hold of what's been placed in front of us. Whether it's putting in the work, staying disciplined, saving consistently, or simply choosing to be faithful in the small things, today is where it starts. Encourage one another daily as long as it is called today. Hebrews 3:13. So, take a breath, take a sip, and let's get to work. It's today again. You can now write me at Joseph's Reserves, 10160 Highway 242, Suite 800, number 401 in Conroe, Texas, zip code 77385. Make sure to include your information so I can write you back. If you liked today's video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Go down into the comment section to catch up with others that you've met within this community. Share the video if you know anyone that might like it, and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, if you like my cloth bag that I'm using to hold 100 troy ounces of 90% silver, definitely go check it out on my website. But as always, thank you so much for watching. And just remember, every ounce adds up, so no matter how small, just keep stacking.